Hey everybody, Omar here, the Knife Shark Guy, and I am back with another fun-filled video for you. And today we're going to be taking a look at what is underneath this towel this time. If you guys recall, last week I did a video on this knife right here. This is the Kershaw NORAD. This knife really impressed me for the fact that it was only 62 bucks, and I really didn't think that Kershaw would be able to offer such good quality knife with really good steel in a lower price, and as it turns out, I was wrong. So today we're going to be taking a look at what's underneath this towel. This is definitely an unexpected purchase. This is the Kershaw Highball 7010. Really sweet little knife. This is a very small knife, so let's go ahead and bring him out. Here he is, the Kershaw Highball. Let's take a good quick look at him before I talk about it. All the way around. It's a very small knife. Model number, as I said before, is 710. Really very small. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the specs on this real quick, followed by some size comparisons, and I'm going to talk about this knife and a little bit more about what Kershaw is doing these days. So let's go ahead and do that. So the blade length of this knife is 2.8 inches. The blade steel is D2. It has gray PVD coating with a satin grind. Get a good close look at that satin grind. Excuse me, that is a... And no, I don't have coronavirus. That is a drop point blade with a satin grind finish. The closed length of this blade is 3.8 inches. The entire knife is made out of stainless steel. Or at least the entire handle is made of stainless steel. The handle thickness is 0.43 inches, and the overall length of this knife, let's take a look. Yeah, the overall length of this knife is roughly... about 6.75 inches. So it's not a really big knife. So why don't we go ahead and finish that off with some size comparisons before I start talking about this knife. Let's go ahead and bring out a few. Let's go ahead and put it up against the knife that I had out last week, which is the Kershaw NORAD. There's Kershaw NORAD right there. And how about the Kershaw Knockout M390 in carbon fiber. All right. Just so you guys can get a better idea of the size of this knife, why don't we go ahead and bring it out against a knife with similar size. Sebenza 21. And finally, let's go ahead and do the ZT0562 in LMAX. But for all intents and purposes, as you guys can see, it's just about the same exact size as a Sebenza 21. So this is a very small knife in D2 steel. As I said before, Kershaw is now beginning to come out and release knives that are not quite as high-end as Zero Tolerance in, say, LMAX or CV20, but they're also not putting out the knives in the Mauve 13, the very low end. This is sort of to fill the gap between those people that are not ready for the high-end knives like Zero Tolerance and Spyderco's higher-end knives, but yet they're also maybe a little bit looking for a little bit more of an adventure away from the Mauve 13 and some of the more low-budget value knives that are offered by CRKT and Kershaw's low-end knives. So for Kershaw to release a knife like this, I think it's a really huge step. It means that they're starting to close the gap. They're starting to get that people are a little bit more educated about knives. They're looking for something more than what the low-end market offers. So to get a knife that comes in D2 steel, and D2 steel, as everybody knows, is a high carbon steel that holds really great edge retention. So basically you sharpen this knife, that edge is going to stay very, very sharp for a really, really long time. So if you want to see just how sharp this knife is, let's go ahead and do a quick paper cut test right on it, so you guys can see if this knife is actually sharp. So here we go. So yeah, this guy is super... Oops, got that one tearing there. Just did it the wrong way. Yeah, this guy is really super, super sharp, as you can see. So, no doubt in my mind that the knife does perform quite well. Now, is it going to perform as great as M390? Probably not. But it's a good enough steel that you'll be able to get it to perform the way you want. So let's take a good close look at this knife now that we got all the specs out of the way and size comparisons. As I said before, this is probably almost similar in build to the Kershaw NORAD, except it's a much smaller knife, right? For those people that are into like maybe medium-sized knives, this might work for you. But if you're not quite into something this big, maybe you want to have something a little bit smaller, maybe to carry around the office, this might definitely be a perfect knife for you. Especially since the blade is under 3 inches, it's not that large. So it's got the nice PVD gray coating on there. A lot of people don't really know how to feel about that. I got to be honest with you, I'm not that crazy about it either. However, because it's got this blue pivot, stainless steel pivot around that black, around the black pivot right there, that ring, it does kind of stand out. Gives it a little bit of a class to it, because your eye definitely needs something to catch on rather than just all gray. Another interesting thing about this knife, like I said before, Kershaw is now releasing a lot of knives in the KVT ball bearing system, which is really fantastic, because if you guys remember, I talked about this topic last week, how people who wanted to experience KVT, let's say 5, maybe even 7 years ago, they couldn't get it at the Kershaw level. They had to go all the way up to 0 tolerance to experience that knife. Well, now that system is being brought to the more lower end knives, or at least more value in knives, to get people to see what it feels like to experience it. And I gotta be honest with you, the KVT ball bearing system in this knife is no different than what I'm feeling in this knife. So it's the same, which tells me that the ball bearing system is probably not that expensive, which is probably why KVT was invented in the first place, because KVT is sort of a takeoff on IKBS. So IKBS, everybody knows, was invented by Ikoma Korth. He's a Japanese knife maker. He invented the IKBS ball bearing system, which is basically a ball bearing system where they carve out a trench inside the knife, and there are balls that fill up that trench inside the pivot, which allows the knife to sort of roll up against each other. Those ball bearings will roll up against each other, and then the knife will open. In the KVT ball bearing system, however, it is quite different. If you could picture a ring inside this pivot here with about 8, I'm going to say with about 8 to 12 balls inserted in a plastic casing, and the balls are not rubbing up against each other, but they are rubbing up against, I guess you want to say, plastic. So, but you're still getting the same rolling effect inside the pivot, which allows the knife to pop out as quickly as it does. So before that, most of the low-end knives that Kershaw had to offer only ran on washers, but now KVT ball bearing system is now coming into the norm, so now they feel they can bring it into the low-end knives, which I think is fantastic, and I think is great, because everybody should experience that. It's a fun thing to experience in a folder. Couple of things about this knife, and I'm going to bring out the Kershaw NORAD to talk about that also. If you guys remember, I told you guys you could Spidey flick this knife, right? easily, you know, no problem. But that's not the only way that you can deploy the knife. Okay, there's also a flipper on it, which I thought was great. It's sort of a hidden flipper. You barely even see it, but it's there, and it works quite just as well. Now, getting back to the Kershaw Highball, this knife does not have a flipper on it, which means that this, what they call a nail nick, is your only way to deploy the knife. And I think that that's actually kind of wrong, because people that are going to be introduced to a knife like this, they really need to be able to access it the same way more sort of experienced people can access it. And even I'm having difficulty doing it. Basically, there's no flipper on it, so you're going to have to use the nail nick. And that's a little bit difficult to do if you're not used to, you know, Spidey Flick, or if you're not a Spidey Flick fan. Myself, I can easily open this knife by Spidey Flicking it, which is quite easy. Basically, you just take your middle finger and stick it in this groove here. You have to kind of angle the knife, but then it will pop right out just as easy. For those of you that can't do that, you're probably going to find out that you will be able to once you get this knife in your hand. You'll be fiddling with it. I guarantee you'll be able to be doing that in no time. But until you can, or until you figure out how, there's no reason why you can't just take the nail nick. It'll be like a two-handed open knife. So I think for those people that are you know, maybe Spring Assist fans and they were looking forward to a flipper, this may not be the knife for you, because there's no other way to open it other than this nail nick. But you can thumb flick it. I've been fiddling with it to try to figure out how to do it. Sometimes I can do it, sometimes I can't. You know, obviously on camera, there you go, I'm having difficulty opening it, but sometimes I get into it and I can do it. So there you go, now I can do it. Basically, you have to kind of find the angle of how you're going to hold the knife in your hand, right? So you put it here. You kind of have to just kind of feel it. Feel where your finger can angle into this groove here, because don't forget, it's a really small knife, so you're going to have difficulty doing it. And what you do is you don't bring it around, like it doesn't flip out this way. You don't flip your finger out this way. You shoot it straight up. So there you go. So basically it's just one movement with your thumb going up, and all you have to do is find the largest part, which is right here where you can get your thumb in there, stick it and kind of cradle the knife in your hand this way. You don't want to do it like that. You want to kind of cradle it in your hand this way, and then when you find it, there it is, and you're going to shoot it straight up. So as you guys can see, I'm ripping my own thumb over here, so, but it's not that sharp. It's just that I have incredibly dry skin. So, but yeah, you could do that easily. See, I'm having difficulty doing it again. So there you go. So you have to kind of find, your thumb kind of has to find that large portion of this nail nick here to do it with your thumb. But other than that, if you're a Spidey Flick fan, this is going to be real easy. Using your middle finger to open it. You don't even have to think about it. It's just there. So, if you decide to go with the Kershaw NORAD, though, you won't have a problem with that if you decide to thumb flick it, because you could just do it easily, because the groove is large enough that you won't have any trouble trying to find that. So, other than being able to, so basically not being able to finger flick it offhand right away, I definitely have to give that a negative on this knife. But other than that, it is very, very smooth, very, very sharp. It's a great knife overall. It's got the same exact action as the Kershaw NORAD. I really don't see any real difference between the KTV ball bearing system in this knife and the KBT ball bearing system in this knife. It's the same quality. It's the same quality as you would get in the higher end ZTs. So basically, they're now closing the gap between, you know, the higher end knives and the low value knives. Now, obviously, there's still a big gap in materials, right? Because don't forget, the ZT is zero tolerance. Mostly all of their knives are made of all titanium. Over here, you don't have titanium. You've got stainless steel. So, but they're still closing the gap in a sense that, once again, I'm able to experience something that's on this knife. I can experience it on a low-end knife. You're not going to get the entire package in a low-end knife, no, but they're going to bring out certain features that are in the high-end knives, and they'll start putting them on the low-end valued folder. So I think that's really important for everybody to understand, because if you go back about 7 years with these low value knives, you were not able to get D2 steel for like $40, which, by the way, that's the price of this knife. It's only $40. To get D2 and for $40 is a big deal. 7 years ago, it cost you like $70 or $80 to get D2. Now the price is coming down. They will what they'll do is they'll give you the high-end steel, but they'll take something away in the materials of the knife, and in this case, of course, you don't get the titanium that's on here. So there's where all the value goes, is that you don't necessarily, obviously, there's always going to be a difference between the high-end knives and the low-value knives, right? But you'll still be able to get at least something that you can experience on the high-end on the low-end knife. So back to the Highball. I think this is a perfect little office knife for anyone who's into it. It's still a knife for someone that's a little bit more experienced. I think they actually made this knife to bring back all people that were stuck in the high-end knives. They wanted them to come back and maybe start buying some low-budget knives. I don't know. But why else would they not at least make it accessible and put a flipper on the knife so everybody could access it? If you're not like a knife collector, you're not going to be able to know how to do that, or, even figure out how to, flick it open with your thumb. I mean, it's just, they should have had more access in the deployment. Otherwise you're going to be stuck with, buying the knife and having to open it two-handed, which I think is fine for those guys that don't really want to fiddle with knives, play with knives too much, or strictly see it only as a tool or something that they're going to use and put in their pocket every day to open a few boxes, and that's great. I think that I could see why they would do that, but for those people that are really into knives, I think they kind of missed the mark by not putting a flipper on the knife there. So the back spacer is, yeah, it's plastic, followed by so basically the back spacer is actually separated, so you can have like a lanyard right there. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Other than the pivot ring, there's not much aesthetics on it. It's just all regular plain black screws. It's kind of interesting, but it doesn't even look like this is even a screw. It looks like it kind of burned, or I don't know what they did there, but that does not look like a screw. You could take it. It looks like it's a one-sided screw. So yeah, you should be able to take this apart if you wanted to. Yeah. But aesthetically, there's not much here other than the blue pivot ring. So there you go. There's more value taken away there, making it even lower. But they're trying to offer you a good size knife with good steel on it. So basically all the money for this knife went to the steel, and everything else on the knife kind of suffered. They didn't bother to put any more aesthetics than a blue pivot ring. Personally, I like the aesthetics on this knife. I really don't have a problem with it. I would have to say this, though. If the blue pivot ring were not there, I probably wouldn't buy the knife at all, because aesthetically it doesn't look that great. However, I think you'll be pleased, to know that the action really is buttery smooth on this. It's just too bad that you will miss that fact you'll miss that excitement because you won't be able to flick it open the way you want to if you're not into knives that much. But other than that, the knife is really solid as a rock. There's no blade play on this at all. The knife is very, very solid. The lockup on the knife is probably about, I'm going to say like, I don't know, what, 58, 59%? It's almost at 50 from looking at that lockup there. But other than that, it's solid as a rock. There's no blade play on this at all. The centering is dead on it as well. You got your pocket clip right there. It's not really a deep pocket clip, so you will be able to ride. The knife will ride in your pocket for a bit, but the pocket clip does have some good spring to it. I mean, yeah, that's real tight. So that's kind of real tight right there. It's definitely got better action than the Benchmade Anthem pocket clip, which is originally the same color as this, which is on the back side. I actually got rid of that pocket clip and had Adam Purvis make this pocket clip for me, because this one now has really great spring and is very functional. So you're not going to have that problem on this Kershaw Highball. Kershaw usually has good pocket clips. They're just very plain, but they are at least functional, which is what you want out of a pocket clip. So to end this video, I don't know. It's got KVT ball bearing system in it. The action is a super duper smooth. Aesthetics are okay with the blue pivot ring on there up against that black pivot. PVD coating, it's all right. For the price, it's okay. Aesthetically, it's okay. I got to be honest with you, all the marks have to go on this knife in the action and the steel. So, and of course the size. The size of the knife is good. So if you're into smaller knives and you're kind of tired of the Mauve 13 and you can Spidey flick, the Highball knife might be for you. This is definitely one that I'm probably more than likely going to wind up keeping. It's just, at least for a while. It's a nice little knife and definitely worth the value. I mean, you can't say no to $40. It's just a fantastic knife. And as far as the flicking thing, eventually you're gonna get it. You'll be able to do that. There was a guy who did a video on this knife like I did. He wasn't able to thumb flick it, but it's all in the angles. Where you put the knife in your hand, and after a while it just becomes second nature to you. Not that I can't do it again, so usually it will work if I'm not thinking about it. There you go. It'll pop open, and the more you fiddle with it, the easier it'll be to use your thumb. But like I said, if you're a Spidey flick person, you don't have to think about it. There you go, it's open. I don't even worry about it. One last thought on the deployment system in here. I'm not so sure the nail nick is going to work for everybody. They may have to abandon this. So there's a chance that all the knives like this that just have a nail groove with a nail nick in there might wind up becoming collector's items, because Kershaw is not going to keep that around long if that becomes an issue with the customers, where they can't actually access the knife and, flick it open, because that's important. It's one of the reasons why a lot of people that are into knives buy knives, because you can flick them, and if you take that away from somebody, then the knife isn't really going to sell very well. But if you're not challenged and you can pretty much flick anything, this will work. The Highball will definitely. See, I missed it again, so there you go, it's back. You'll definitely miss it again, but it kind of balances out, you know what I mean? Because you're getting a knife in D2 steel. You're getting a knife with the KVT ball bearing system. You're getting really nice action out of it. So the package is there. You just kind of have to, kind of ignore the negatives on this one and just really think about what this knife has to offer, and if what it has to offer can make you ignore what you don't like about the knife, then it'll be for you. Because there's too many good things about this knife than there are bad. So, the Kershaw Highball. Bring it back out again. 7010 by Kershaw. One of the more early newer releases for 2020 from Kershaw. As you guys know, they'll probably have more midline knives coming. I'm gonna say probably right around late September, early August, when they do SHOT Show again. So can all be on the lookout for that. But in the meantime, they'll have, you also have the Kershaw NORAD, you'll have the Kershaw Highball, you'll have the Kershaw Tumbler to check out, also the Kershaw Believer, the Payout. There's a bunch of stuff that they put out on their website that's new, all in D2 steel. So that's, if you guys are getting kind of sick of the Mauve 13 deal, both these two offerings here might be for you. Definitely, it's always kind of nice to have some low-budget stuff in your collection. Some knives you can afford to beat up on. That's not to say I'll never beat up on my, Anthem, because I'm sure I will. But, it's always good to have some low-budget knives in your collection. And, of course, if you're a knife collector, you always want to be on top of what's the low end people doing now? I think that's also important, because don't forget, you are a collector, and you love to talk about knives. You live knives, so why completely ignore this market where there's going to be more people like you coming up because they purchase knives like this, and they're going to want your opinion on what you think of their lower end knives. So anyway, that's it for the Kershaw Highball. This is Omar, the Knife Shark Guy, signing off, hoping you will find this piece of sharp art in your collection. Until next time, this is Omar, the Knife Shark Guy, signing off, and hoping you're all staying safe.